quiet, foggy road. Hazy headlights illuminate yellow and white striping, curving as you pass the endless blackened roadway. Cars are sparse. You haven't seen one for miles. And past those lights, the world beyond your windshield is lost in oblivion. Eyelids heavy, your vision blurs and darkens, but before you drift, you see her, motionless, immovable, in the middle of the street. Panicked feet slam the brakes, tires screeching, hands jerking the wheel left. Swerving wheels bounce off of dirt and gravel, or metal and glass shattering, bending, rapping violently against thick bark. A spray of splinters, a blinding flash of light, then the airbag deploys, forcing your head against the cushion. Groggy, ears ringing, fresh bruises and scrapes pulse beneath waves of dull pain. Silence is broken by the hiss of the radiator and your alarm blaring. Then you remember. You quickly turn. Is she all right? But you're alone. Who was that? How odd. Flowing gown, barefoot, dripping, wet hair, expressionless, pale, almost reflective, heart racing. You say the worst is over, but in the rear view, ahead, turned downward, with damp, inky tresses. You whip around, glancing over your shoulder, to nothing. Again. Roadway empty, backseat vacant. A story like many others, of the woman in white. I'm your host, Melissa Nunez, and welcome to Candid the Cryptic, your source for all things strange, spooky, and unexplained. Accounts like this exist all over the world, from the United States to Ireland and Germany. Different roads, different witnesses, but always her, the woman in white. Waiting in the dark, and somehow, long before the legend spread, humanity had already begun seeing her. While vampires evolve, demons go by other names, and monsters fade in and out of obscurity, certain figures never really disappear. One being a ghostly fair-skinned woman draped in flowy robes. And you've seen her before, even if you don't realize it. In fact, out of 15 seasons and 327 episodes, Supernatural's very first case was the woman in white.
Dad's on a hunting trip, and he hasn't been home in a few days.
Not your typical ghost story. A hitchhiker, quiet, pale, locked in place, stranded beside the highway, the ultimate foundation to saving people, hunting things, the family business. Sam and Dean Winchester investigate an isolated back road. Drivers report these encounters, presumably harmless, until she's in the car. The episode draws heavily from real-world vanishing hitchhiker legends, one of the oldest narratives ever recorded. But Supernatural adds its own tragic mythology, the woman, betrayed by her husband, who at death is doomed to a cycle of grief and violence.
It's kind of this local legend. This one girl, she got murdered out on Centennial, like decades ago. Well, supposedly she's still out there. She hitchhikes, and whoever picks her up, well, they disappear forever.
And that choice is interesting, because the woman in white would perfectly establish what Supernatural would become at its core. Not just a show about monsters, but urban legends and the lingering anguish left behind after tragedy. Even visually, the episode leans into classic imagery pulled directly from centuries of folklore. Rural isolation, reflective pale fabric, dark, wet hair, abandoned roads, the backseat reveal.
Take me home.
It's one of the clearest examples of modern horror repackaging ancient myths into contemporary storytelling. And maybe that's why the episode worked so well. Audiences already understood the fear instinctively. In Crimson Peak, the woman in white becomes something far older and sadder. Guillermo del Toro doesn't portray the pale female apparitions as random supernatural threats. They're warnings, echoes of violence trapped within the house itself. Throughout the film, Edith repeatedly encounters spectral women moving through Allerdale Hall, their forms thin and skeletal beneath delicate billowing gowns, glowing against the darkness of the mansion like candlelight through fog. Silent apparitions drifting through corridors, warning the living. It behaves like classic lore attached to the woman in white. In the house, in many of these legends, the spirit is inseparable from the place it haunts. Bridges, ruins, lakes, roads. In Crimson Peak, the haunting is fused with the mansion itself. The ghosts are manifestation of buried memory, hidden violence, and unresolved suffering, literally bleeding through the walls.
The red clay mines are the oldest part of the house, and I think they hold the most secrets. It's the gut of the house is the place where the most emotional and the most violent confrontations are going to take place. The walls are dripping with red clay, everything is wet, and everything is dark.
That's why the film feels more melancholic than frightening. The ghosts aren't evil, they're trapped. Like many other women in white stories, it symbolizes unresolved pain and sorrow rather than malice. Del Toro even described the film as a lavish gothic romance as opposed to a horror movie, which makes sense because this genre has always been deeply connected to this archetype. Lonely estates, mourning women, family secrets, emotional unrest that survives even death. The apparitions in Crimson Peak aren't poltergeists. They're omens, agonizing memories that scar a place, refusing to be forgotten.
Ghosts are real. This much I know. There are things that tie them to a place, very much like they do us. Some remain tethered to a patch of land, a time and date, the spilling of blood, a terrible crime. But there are others that hold on to an emotion, a drive, loss, revenge, or love. Those, they never go away.
Still, what unsettles us allows legend to evolve, transforming tortured spirits into something weaponized. A modern distortion of fear. In Mama, pale apparitions emerge from dark corners and shadowed hallways, with many of the same visual cues tied to centuries of Lady in White legends. Sheer, flowing fabrics while standing rigid and motionless. And a mother's grief enveloping a home, blending nurture, loss, and death.
Don't look at her! She's mad.
And that matters because, historically, these entities are rarely connected to random places. They're bound to their suffering, betrayal, mourning, or loss, so severe it stains the environment itself. The home in Mama functions the same way. Fear accumulates until the empty house comes alive. Classic stories often revolve around persistent sorrow. Mama transforms those emotions into visual horror through isolation, abandonment, and dependency. The children's attachment to the spirit becomes part of the horror itself. After years of isolation, they begin seeing the entity as a motherly figure, blurring the lines between protection and possession. Instead of haunting from a distance, the spirit forms an emotional bond. The terror feels intimate and psychologically invasive. As Louis says, a ghost is an emotion bent out of shape, condemned to repeat itself time and time again, until it rights the wrong that was done.
Tom, Lily, Mama, Victoria! No! Lily, Mama! Lily! Oh God, bring her back! Lily!
Visually, it gives way to exactly why this archetype endures. A pale figure, paralyzed in darkness, terrifies audiences not because they fail to recognize it, but because they do. Folklorists don't classify her as a single ghost, but as a reoccurring phenomenon, an apparition appearing across cultures under different names, yet described in remarkably similar ways. Academic records trace white lady legends through British, Irish, German, Filipino, Latin American, and American traditions dating back centuries. The details change, but the image almost never does. A pale woman, wispy, sheer robes, coming at night, into a place tied to tragedy. Roads, bridges, forests, lakes, ruins, places suspended between one thing and another. Researchers describe these thresholds where people psychologically expect uncertainty or transformation. And maybe that's why these stories persist, because the woman in white lurks in places where one world gives way to another. It's late. A driver sees someone standing beside a lonely road, a woman dressed in white. He offers her a ride. She may speak softly, or not at all. But at some point during the drive, she disappears. And when the driver reaches their destination, therein lies the truth. That there, wherever there may be, she died, and died in such a way that now she may never rest. Folklorists have documented versions of this exact story across the world for generations. But no matter how far-reaching, what's fascinating is how little the narrative changes. Different countries, different decades, same woman. One of the most famous American examples is the Lady of the Lake, specifically White Rock Lake, Texas. Encounters of her in a soaked dress standing by the road under the cover of night span decades. According to multiple reports, she asked drivers for a ride home before vanishing from the vehicle entirely. For some, she leaves wet footprints. Others are left with damp seats. As described in The Haunting History Behind a Unique North Texas Lake, a WFAA article by Sean Giggy, long ago, a lady in a soaking wet dress stopped a young couple driving by and asked for a ride home. The couple agreed, but when they arrived at their destination, they looked in the back seat, and the woman was gone. Where she was sitting, there was just a puddle of water. Local newspapers have been documenting sightings of her since at least the 1960s. In Wales, there are legends of E Lady Wen, or the White Lady, which described a spectral woman appearing near isolated roads, ruined buildings, churchyards, and stretches of countryside wrapped in fog. Unlike many modern hauntings, E Lady Wen is rarely described as violent. She appears quietly. Witnesses often describe her as standing motionless near crossroads or stone ruins, her hands clasped together or ringing nervously, as though overcome with grief. In some encounters, she silently gestures for travelers to follow her. In others, she simply watches before vanishing into the darkness. I found one 19th century account especially unsettling, not because it defies imagination, but because it starts so ordinary. According to the report, it was late when the witness saw a woman dressed in sullen clothing near the road. They spoke briefly before the witness noticed inconsistencies. Nothing monstrous or dramatic, just something deeply wrong. Maybe because they finally questioned what the woman was doing, alone, in the dark. Or maybe it was her presence, which seemed impossibly silent and unnatural, as if the world quieted along with her. Or maybe it was when she vanished. A detail that appears over and over throughout this lore. The terror rarely comes immediately. It comes in slow realization that the woman, this hitchhiker, was never a woman at all. This may explain why the woman in white feels fundamentally different from modern horror tropes. She isn't villainous. She's sorrowful, grief personified. And psychologically, that matters more than people realize. Researchers in animalistic psychology, the scientific study of paranormal experiences, suggest many ghost sightings occur during periods of heightened emotion, exhaustion, isolation, mourning, or environmental ambiguity. One frequently cited experiment found that participants were significantly more likely to report ghostly sensations if they believed the location was haunted. The brain predicts before it receives, especially in darkness, especially when afraid. Neurological research has also shown that disturbances in spatial awareness and sensory processing can create the feeling of another presence. In experiments, participants reported sensing shadow figures or unseen entities despite no one actually being present. So maybe ghosts aren't always something we encounter, but something the mind conjures under the right circumstances. But psychology alone doesn't explain why it's the woman in white who persists. Why not another story? Why her? Folklore scholars believe the archetype may reflect historical anxieties surrounding grief, femininity, and loss. Many of these legends involve betrayal, forbidden love, suicide, or violent death. Burial shrouds, mourning garments, funeral traditions. Researchers note that pale fabric and darkness would have also appeared highly visible under moonlight, naturally reinforcing ghostly imagery attached to these stories. Over time, the woman in white becomes less of a single legend, and more like a visual language humans instinctively understood, which is exactly why modern horror still returns to her, and outside horror, the archetype survives. The Woman in White, written by Wilkie Collins around 1960, popularized the mysterious pale maiden in Victorian fiction decades before modern cinema. The novel opens with a woman dressed in white, seen unexpectedly on the road late at night. The imagery that would influence ghost storytelling for generations. And in many ways, modern paranormal media still follows the same blueprint. The road, the woman, and a warning nobody understands until it's too late. Even paranormal investigators struggle to categorize the phenomenon. In the late 19th century, members of the Society for Psychical Research investigated what would become known as the Cheltenham ghost, a veiled female apparition repeatedly seen moving silently through a house in England between the 1880s and 1886. Multiple witnesses independently described the figure as appearing completely solid and human at first glance. Investigators documented interviews, timelines, and observations, but no definitive explanation emerged. So, no proof, no debunking, just more ambiguity. And maybe that's where the woman in white has always existed. Between folklore and psychology, memory and hallucination, haunting and human perception. Because maybe these ghost stories were never about proving the supernatural. Maybe they survived because they preserve the weight, the echo of grief. Tragedy tied to a bridge, sorrow washing in with the tide, roadside warnings and mourning as ancient as ruins. And eventually, the place itself becomes haunted. Not necessarily by spirits, but by memory. The woman in white may simply be humanity's oldest symbol for unresolved trauma, a figure permanently standing at the threshold between past and present. And even now, stories continue. Drivers still report women standing beside hidden roadways. There are still shared encounters of silent figures near forests. Still those lakeside tragedies that endure long after death. The setting changes, but the character never does. A woman in white telling the same ghost story without even realizing it, even centuries later. So next time you stare down the darkness in a long, empty hallway, on the roadside just outside your headlights, or over the railing on the bridge's edge, and you see her pale silhouette, billowing robes and dripping ravenous locks, remember, whether she's a ghost, a trick of the mind, or grief given shape, she's still waiting somewhere in the dark, watching. Thanks for tuning in on another episode of Candidly Cryptic. If you enjoy all things strange, spooky, and unexplained, please follow for more.